Hello, sleepy dreamer. How you doing? Tonight I'll be your guide, here to ease you into calm, restful sleep. Before we get started, remember to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss future scary bedtime stories. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Also, let me know if there's a story you'd love to hear next. I never imagined that my career would leave a mark I could never shake off. Something that would keep me restless in anonymous hotel rooms at 3 in the morning, lying awake, listening to phantom echoes from 35,000 feet above the world. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I've worked as a flight attendant for Meridian Skies Airlines for 11 years. Most of my assignments are international, San Francisco to Seoul, Hong Kong, and occasionally Melbourne. When people picture flight attendants, they imagine polished smiles, drink carts, and glamorous travel ads. The truth is far more demanding. We're trained for every scenario: medical crises, fires, sudden decompressions, even hijackings. We're protectors of 300 lives sealed inside a metal cylinder 7 miles over endless ocean. Yet no drill or handbook could have prepared me for what unfolded on flight MS-417 last October. It began like any other long overnight journey from San Francisco to Kyoto, 14 hours of Pacific sky ahead. Every seat was booked, 348 passengers, families eager for autumn festivals, students flying back home, and professionals absorbed in glowing screens. I had just turned 34 that week, and usually I appreciated these marathon flights. They had a rhythm I found soothing: the chaos of boarding, meal trays rattling through aisles, cabin lights dimming, then the hush of travelers sinking into sleep. But that night, almost from the moment boarding began, something felt off. "Welcome aboard," I greeted automatically as passengers shuffled past with pillows and bags. My coworker Lila murmured beside me, "Long one tonight. Let's hope for calm skies." We shared tired smiles. Flight attendants rely on hope. Hope for stable weather. Hope for peaceful passengers. Hope that nothing goes terribly wrong. Halfway through boarding, a man drew my attention. Mid-30s, pale, slender, a dark jacket clinging to him like protection. He hesitated at the door, eyes flicking from face to face as if memorizing everyone. When he finally extended his boarding pass, I noticed his hand quiver faintly. "Seat 37C, I read aloud, directing him down the aisle. He gave a quick nod, saying nothing, and slipped inside. His silence unsettled me for a moment, though I brushed it aside. We see all sorts of travelers. By 1:30 a.m. cabin time, most were asleep, the steady drone of engines and the flicker of screens filling the dimness. I moved carefully with my flashlight, checking belts and looking for anyone unwell. That's when I noticed him again. Seat 37C. He sat bolt upright, fists tight on the armrests, eyes locked on the blank seatback screen. His breathing was shallow, and sweat dampened his collar despite the cool air. I crouched close. "Sir, are you feeling all right? Can I get you something?" His head turned slowly. His eyes were wide, pupils blown in the faint light. "They know I'm here," he whispered hoarsely. "Don't act like you're talking to me. They're watching." My training steadied me. Perhaps paranoia, anxiety, or a reaction to medication. I kept my tone even. "Who's watching you?" His hand suddenly clamped around my wrist, startling me. "You don't understand," he rasped. "They drugged me before I boarded. They're testing it. Don't drink the water. Don't eat the food. It's poisoned." I spoke firmly, though gently. "Sir, please release my hand." Slowly, shame shadowed his face, as his grip eased. Then he muttered, "I wasn't meant to see the files, only numbers, but I saw names. Arms deals, transfers, billions. They can't allow me to land." My stomach nodded. This wasn't just fear of flying. "Why don't you step with me to the galley?" I suggested quietly. "We can speak more privately there." To my surprise, he agreed. In the rear galley, far from curious stares, his agitation grew worse. He pressed himself against the counter, trembling. "I'm Daniel Reed," he blurted. "I'm an accountant. Last week in Jakarta, I was reviewing defense contracts. I accessed servers I shouldn't have. I found transfers tied to governments and groups that should never have weapons like these. Now they're after me. They'll kill anyone to silence me." I traded a quick look with Lila, who had joined us. Her raised brows suggested she thought it was a psychotic break. But something in his eyes unsettled me. His fear was too raw, too consuming. When I quietly reached for the interphone to contact the purser, Daniel stiffened. "No," he hissed. "Don't call anyone. They'll know." I kept my voice steady. "Daniel, you're safe. No one here intends to harm you." He shook his head violently. You don't get it. They're already here. Some of your crew aren't who you think." His gaze darted toward Leela. She flushed with anger but stayed silent. I discreetly signaled anyway, and minutes later our onboard air marshal arrived. Broad-shouldered, calm, his name was David Cole. "Daniel, I'm David," he said with steady authority. "I'm here to help. Let's sit down." Daniel recoiled, eyes narrowing. "You're one of them, aren't you? I see your badge. You think I don't know?" His voice grew louder, stirring passengers nearby. Then suddenly, he lunged at the galley cart, seizing a metal coffee pot. "Stay back," he shouted, voice cracking. "If I don't reach Kyoto, they'll erase us all." Passengers stirred in fear. "Put it down," David commanded firmly. But Daniel's eyes blazed. He yanked a black rectangular object from his pocket. In the shadows, it looked like a gun. Several passengers screamed. In an instant, David tackled him. The object slid across the floor. It was only a portable charger. With help from 2 passengers, Daniel was restrained, wrists tied with zip cuffs. Tears streaked his face. "You don't understand," he sobbed. "If I vanish, everything I said is true." For the next 10 hours, he remained sedated under a doctor's watch. He muttered incoherently at times, eyes rolling back, then fell into uneasy silence. When we landed at Kansai International, Japanese officials boarded immediately and escorted him away. Relief swept the cabin. Just another unruly traveler, we told ourselves. Paperwork, reports, and we'd move on. But I couldn't forget. 3 days later, still in Kyoto on layover, my supervisor called. "Rachel, some officials want to debrief you about MS-417. Expecting routine follow-up, I entered the hotel conference room where 2 men in dark suits waited. No badges, no names. They asked me to repeat Daniel's words exactly. When I asked why, one smiled thinly. "Standard intelligence procedure. He's had prior psychiatric problems. Nothing to worry about." Yet the other scribbled notes furiously, barely glancing up. "Is what he claimed true?" I pressed cautiously. "About the files, the weapons?" Silence. Finally, one man stood. "Thank you for your time, Miss Morgan. That'll be all." I left with my pulse racing. Back in San Francisco, life carried on. Briefings, flights, hotels. But Daniel's face haunted me. His voice clung to memory. One night at home, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was unfamiliar. Subject MS-417. The message said only, "They were listening. Be careful." I froze, breath caught, and deleted it instantly. Changed my email address. Told myself it was just him. Until a month later, during boarding on another Seoul route, I glimpsed a headline on a passenger's phone. "American accountant found dead in Jakarta. Apparent suicide." The photo beneath was Daniel Reed. My stomach dropped. I tried to reason it away. A troubled man lost in paranoia. Nothing more. But on long-haul flights, when the cabin is hushed and hundreds sleep under my care, I find myself studying them differently, wondering what secrets they hide, wondering who is truly watching who. And sometimes in the quiet galley, with engines droning endlessly, I swear I still hear his whisper, "They can't let me land." I never imagined I would be the type of person to share an experience like this. For most of my life, I've been the cautious kind, the sort who irons uniforms crisp, double-checks alarms, and never forgets to switch off the stove. My name is Rachel Turner, and I've been a flight attendant for nearly 11 years. People always assume the role is glamorous. Overnights in Rome, clinking champagne glasses, crews striding together through terminals like they belong in glossy magazines. The truth is, it's swollen feet, endless delays, passengers snapping at you, and the relentless drone of engines still echoing long after you've stepped off the plane. Even so, I loved it. At least I did until the night that altered everything. I was 24 when I applied to Northern Sky Airlines, a mid-tier carrier that ran mostly national flights but occasionally sent crews abroad. I still remember telling my dad, who frowned in that way only he could. "Rachel," he said, "so you're going to hand out peanuts at 30,000 feet? That's really what you want?" And I did. Not for the peanuts, but because growing up in Des Moines with a mother who stacked travel catalogs high and a brother who enlisted in the Air Force, planes felt like my rebellion and my freedom wrapped together. The thought of opening my eyes in Boston one morning and waking in Denver the next lit a fire in me. By the time I turned 30, I had worked hundreds of routes. I'd managed drunken passengers, mid-air medical chaos, turbulence that tossed people around. I thought I had seen it all. Then came Flight 812. It was February of 2019. A snowstorm had blanketed Chicago, leaving Midway Airport snarled in delays. Our crew had been switched onto a red-eye bound for Seattle, usually one of my favorite runs. The cabin team was me, Andrea, and a rookie named Miguel, eager and still green. Captain Robert Shaw had that firm, steady voice that put passengers at ease, and his first officer, Henry, spoke little but handled things well. The night began as usual. Andrea and I stood at the boarding door, greeting travelers with routine smiles. People shuffled past wrapped in scarves, clutching hot coffee, breath clouding from the lingering chill. At first it seemed like nothing unusual. Then she appeared. She looked in her early 30s, though perhaps younger, her long black hair damp as though she had stepped out of rain. Her complexion was pale, in a way that wasn't cosmetic. She carried no suitcase, no bag, only a thin leather clutch. She handed me her boarding slip in silence. "Good evening," I offered, hoping to catch her gaze. She didn't reply, just moved toward first class. Andrea whispered after checking the sheet, "Seat 2A." I nodded, thinking little of it. Some passengers are cold, some are timid, some simply want the trip to end. But something in her silence pressed on me. Once at cruising height, things eased. Lights dimmed, passengers leaned back. The familiar low hum took over. I worked coach service while Andrea handled first class, and Miguel was stuck gathering trash. When I finally crossed the curtain, I checked 2A. The woman sat upright, stiff, eyes fixed forward. Her seat wasn't reclined, her blanket remained folded, her hands pressed to the armrests, fingers coiled tight. "Would you care for a drink?" I asked gently. Her eyes shifted to me. Dark, so dark they barely caught light. "Water," she muttered, her voice low, unused. I set a glass before her. She never touched it. Later, when I came for empty cups, the water sat full. That was the first moment I felt the cold trace through me. 2 hours in, turbulence hit. Not violent, but enough to rattle trays and make passengers grip seats. Andrea and I strapped in at the galley jump seats. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. The woman in 2A was not buckled. She rose, deliberate, barefoot steps soundless on the carpet. "Miss," I called over the shakes, "please return to your seat." She ignored me, eyes locked on the cockpit door. Before I could unbuckle, Miguel appeared, blocking her. "You must sit now," he said firmly. She leaned close, lips brushing his ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I watched the blood drain from his face. He froze, then turned and bolted into the galley. I caught his arm, whispering, "What did she tell you?" He shook his head fiercely. "Nothing. I can't repeat it." He wouldn't step back into first class again that night. Half an hour later, Captain Shaw's voice came calm through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, just a touch of turbulence, nothing serious. Please stay seated." Afterward, my interphone rang. It was Shaw. "Rachel, have you noticed anything out of the ordinary?" My stomach dropped. "Why?" I asked. "Because we just intercepted a signal." A woman's voice broke through on emergency frequency. She said a single word, "Run." I glanced toward 2A. She remained still, lips unmoving, water untouched. "Captain," I whispered, "I think it came from inside." Silence. Then, "Stay sharp. Lock the galley carts before the cockpit. Do not let anyone approach." Time dragged painfully. People slept. The shaking stopped. But 2A never shifted, never blinked much at all. That haunted me. She hardly blinked. Near 4 in the morning, before descent, Andrea returned pale. She spoke. She whispered. "What did she say?" I asked. Andrea shook her head. "Not to me. To the man across the aisle." She leaned in, whispered, and 10 seconds later he rang his call button, begging to get off immediately. We were 30,000 feet in the air. I asked, "What did you tell him?" She swallowed. "That he had to wait." But Rachel, his face, he looked like he'd met death. I peeked through the curtain. The man in 3C sat rigid, drenched in sweat, hands gripping the seat so tightly they whitened. And in 2A, for the first time, she smiled. We descended over Seattle under a sky still cloaked in darkness. The city lights sparkled below, but I could hardly glance at them. My gaze never left 2A. She sat motionless, no luggage, no sip of water. After landing, passengers stretched and gathered their things, but she remained. "Miss," I said softly, standing near her, "we've arrived. You need to disembark." Slowly, she turned, eyes unblinking, locking onto mine. She leaned close, her breath icy against my cheek. "Come down to the field," she whispered. I froze, every instinct screaming to flee. Andrea touched my arm behind me. "Rachel, who are you talking to?" I spun around to gesture, but the seat was empty. Security swept the aircraft. Nothing. No record of her boarding slip. In fact, 2A was unassigned. Miguel refused to fly again for a month. The passenger in 3C filed a complaint that something inhuman had been on board, though corporate hushed it quickly. I tried to sleep in my hotel afterward, but her words followed me. Come down to the field. Even now, years later, I jolt awake at night, certain I'll see her standing barefoot at the foot of my bed, her dress shifting as though unseen turbulence still carried her forward. I keep flying. What else can I do? This job is my life. Yet each time I scan the cabin and glimpse seat 2A, I feel my throat tighten. And every winter, as storms shake planes across the skies, I wonder if she's still out there, whispering to another unfortunate soul, beckoning them down into whatever endless field waits beneath the clouds. I never imagined working as a flight attendant would one day fuel my darkest nightmares. Outsiders assume our job is glamorous, jetting across continents, strolling through new cities, enjoying discounted flights. In truth, it's grueling. Endless shifts, stale air, impatient passengers, constant delays, and feet that ache as though made of stone. My name is Elena Rivera. I'm 27, and I work for Cascadia Airways, a mid-sized carrier headquartered in Portland, Oregon. I had been with the airline for nearly 4 years when everything changed. The memory of that night replays in my mind endlessly. Writing it down is my only way of assuring myself it truly happened, though deep down I know no one else would ever believe it. It began on an overnight run from Chicago to Vancouver. I hadn't originally aspired to this career. I studied communications in college with hazy ambitions of breaking into media, but life rarely bends to our plans. During my senior year, my mother grew ill, and I needed work that allowed me the freedom to fly home to care for her. A friend suggested becoming a flight attendant. The pay was decent, the schedule adjustable, the benefits steady. I thought it would be temporary. Yet 4 years later, I was still here. Most nights, I'd grown to appreciate the routine: boarding announcements, safety checks, distributing meals, casual conversations with passengers who weren't overly drunk or irritable. Though overnight flights strained my body, they were sometimes smoother than noisy daytime ones packed with restless children. But that particular October week, I was running on fumes. My schedule bounced me from Denver to Chicago to Dallas, then back again. There was hardly enough time in hotel rooms to recall what city I had just left. My final leg was the red-eye back to Vancouver. Afterward, I'd finally have 2 full days at home. That promise alone kept me moving. We started boarding at about 11:15 p.m. I was posted mid-cabin to welcome travelers. My hair was pulled back tight in company regulation, my lips stretched and the practiced polite smile drilled into us. Most passengers trudged on board with weary expressions, business people in rumpled suits, college students lugging backpacks, families with children already half asleep. Nothing unusual stood out until she appeared. Perhaps mid-30s. Her skin looked pale, almost wax-like. Her black hair was twisted into a bun, pulled so tight it seemed to stretch her features unnaturally. Her eyes were too wide, held open in a way that felt deliberate, as if she refused to blink. She carried nothing. No purse, no carry-on, not even a phone in her grasp. She walked down the aisle with a faint smile, locking eyes with me and never breaking that stare as she passed. A sick feeling rolled through me. Most people give a quick glance, sometimes a brief smile, or nothing at all. But her gaze cut straight through me. She sat in seat 14C, the middle. I logged it instinctively. Part of our training is noting unusual passengers and where they sit. Roughly 20 minutes after we lifted off, I began my routine cabin walk. The cabin lights had dimmed. Passengers were already settling into blankets, headphones snug. When I approached row 14, she sat perfectly upright, her hands folded neatly in her lap. As I passed, her head rotated toward me slowly. That same strange smile plastered across her face. "Everything all right, ma'am?" I whispered in my professional tone. She tilted her head. "You look tired." I forced a small laugh. "It's been a long week." Her voice dropped again. "You seem like someone who dreams a great deal but keeps it secret." Her words stopped me cold. I blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" Her grin stretched wider. "Sorry, habit. I read people." The way she said it made the hair on my arms prickle. I nodded quickly and kept moving. But as the flight wore on, her strangeness became undeniable. She mirrored the man in 14D, copying each of his gestures seconds later. If he pulled at his sleeves, so did she. If he crossed his legs, she followed. Every subtle move replicated. At one point, I overheard her murmur to him, "Sleep is strange." You never know who might be watching as you drift away." He froze, gave her a forced smile, then shoved on his headphones. About an hour in, I was pushing the beverage cart with my coworker Marissa when turbulence shook the cabin. Nothing severe, just enough to rattle cups and make passengers grip their trays. I glanced back at 14C. She hadn't budged. Not a twitch, not even the faint jolt others experienced. Her frame sat stiff, hands still folded, eyes fixed forward, the same smile frozen in place. When our eyes met, she whispered words I can never erase. "You shouldn't ignore me." A chill ran through me. I tore my gaze away, nudging the cart onward. The rest of the journey blurred in anxious haze. Passengers drifted into uneasy sleep, and Marissa and I whispered in the galley about how unsettling that woman was. By the time we landed in Vancouver after 1 a.m., people shuffled off groggy. I stood by the exit offering goodbyes, but when row 14 cleared, she was nowhere. Perhaps she slipped out quickly, I thought, yet I had no memory of her walking past. Later, when I checked the passenger manifest, my stomach dropped. Seat 14C was listed as vacant, but I had seen her, spoken to her, watched her sit there for hours. Our crew was shuttled to a nearby airport hotel, a modest chain. I told myself I must have misread the manifest, or perhaps she'd been reassigned at the last minute. Fatigue can warp perception. I checked into room 512 on the 5th floor and collapsed on the bed. I might have slept an hour when I awoke to suffocating pressure. My eyes flew open. She was straddling me. The same passenger, the same tightly wound bun, the same wax-like skin, the same grotesque grin stretched unnaturally wide. Her knees pressed into my ribs, holding me down. "You weren't supposed to ignore me," she hissed. Her breath burned against my cheek. I tried to scream, but she pressed a finger to my lips. With a giggle, she held up a bent metal hair clip. I used this to get in. Terror fueled me. I shoved her with desperate strength, sending her tumbling to the floor. She emitted a guttural, animal-like sound before darting toward the door. I scrambled for the phone and called the front desk, my voice shaking as I reported someone had broken in. Security arrived, but she was gone. Only the bent clip remained on the carpet, and the latch clearly forced. CCTV confirmed she had followed me inside, and later fled out a rear exit. Police took my statement, pulled flight records, but nothing added up. According to their data, she had never existed. No boarding pass, no booking, no identification linked to that seat. They told me I was lucky, that she could have carried a knife, that she might have killed me. But they didn't understand. What she left me with was far worse. Since that night, I haven't slept through a single evening. I wake to phantom weight crushing my chest. I hear her whispering in the dark. "You weren't supposed to ignore me." And sometimes, crossing through busy terminals, I catch a glimpse of her pale face in the crowd, smiling that same terrible smile, always watching. I never imagined the career I once thought was a dream would nearly unravel my sanity and almost cost another woman her child. My name is Amelia Grant. I'm 32 years old and have been flying as a cabin attendant with Atlantic Skies Airlines for just over 7 years. When most people hear that, they picture glamour, exotic destinations, champagne lounges, and pressed uniforms with painted smiles. The reality is far from the glossy brochures. It's endless fatigue, swollen ankles, recycled air, turbulence, and the constant act of appearing calm even when your pulse is racing. I never entered this field for the luxury. I entered out of necessity. After graduation, I was drowning in student loans, juggling 2 part-time jobs that barely covered rent in Phoenix. My father died suddenly of a heart attack when I was 24, and my mother's medical bills began stacking higher than I could manage. A college friend mentioned airlines were hiring rapidly, promising reliable pay and benefits. I applied, telling myself it would be short-term. 7 years later, I'm still flying, still waiting for temporary to end. But last week, on a flight from Delhi to Sydney, something happened that clings to me even now. A reminder of how fragile trust becomes at 30,000 feet above the ground. I was part of a 4-person crew on Flight 217, a long haul with a stop in Kuala Lumpur. Morning flights are notoriously chaotic. Passengers half awake, families struggling with strollers, business travelers glued to their screens. The airport was a storm of bodies that morning, one of the busiest I'd ever seen. Crowds shoved through security, announcements roared, suitcase wheels rattled against polished floors. Sweat was already building under my navy jacket as I adjusted my scarf and dragged my roller bag across the terminal. Our lead attendant, Clara, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with sleek ironed hair, waved when she spotted me. "Amelia, there you are, ready for a long one." "As ready as I'll ever be," I muttered, forcing a smile. She smirked knowingly. "Coffee's in the galley. Grab some before we board." I nodded and headed toward the gate. That's when I saw her. She sat near the windows alone, wearing an ivory pantsuit that screamed privilege. A pearl necklace, oversized sunglasses, and hair knotted neatly in a bun. But it wasn't her wardrobe that caught me. It was her gaze. She wasn't watching me or the departure screens. She was staring at a woman wrestling with a stroller. The mother looked exhausted, probably mid-30s, hair wild from humidity, dressed in a simple t-shirt and joggers. Her little girl, maybe 2, with soft curls and wide brown eyes, clutched a stuffed rabbit as she dozed. The woman in pearls studied the child's face as if she was memorizing it. A shiver crawled across my back. Maybe it was harmless. I'd seen strangers dote on babies countless times, but her stillness, her calculating calm, unsettled me. "Amelia," Clara called, snapping me out of it. I turned and returned to the gate, forcing myself to let it go. Takeoff went smoothly. We moved through the cabin with rehearsed precision, stowing luggage, fastening belts, demonstrating oxygen masks. I tried to focus, but my eyes kept drifting to her seat 14A, and a few rows back. The young mother with her child curled in her lap. During drink service, I paused at 14A. "Good morning, ma'am. Anything to drink?" She lowered her glasses, revealing icy blue eyes. "Sparkling water, room temperature." "Of course." I smiled, but inside unease swirled. Those eyes weren't warm, they were measuring. When I handed her the bottle, she didn't thank me. She glanced past me, straight at the toddler squirming in her mother's arms 2 rows down. Mid-flight, the seatbelt sign switched off. Passengers moved toward the restrooms. I was collecting trays when the mother approached. Stroller folded, baby shifting in her arms. "Could you watch this for a moment?" she asked softly. "I need to take her to the restroom." I nodded. "Of course, take your time." She disappeared inside, child balanced on her hip. I set the stroller neatly against the wall. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement. 14A rose smoothly, moving down the aisle with deliberate ease, eyes fixed on the stroller. I stepped forward quickly. "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" Her expression was neutral. "Oh," she said lightly. "I thought this was blocking the aisle. Just wanted to move it." Her hand lingered on the stroller's handle longer than it should. "That's all right," I replied firmly, sliding it closer to me. "I've got it handled." A faint smile tugged at her lips, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. Something was wrong. Moments later, the mother reappeared with her fussy toddler, and I returned the stroller with a polite nod. As the woman buckled her daughter in, a smooth voice chimed in. "She's such a beautiful child." The woman from 14A stood nearby, leaning casually against a seat. The mother looked up, wary. Thank you." "How old is she?" the woman pressed. 2, the mother answered shortly, adjusting the blanket. "Lovely age," the woman said, tone lingering. "They're so impressionable." I stepped closer, my professional smile fixed. "Ma'am, please return to your seat while the aisle is occupied." Sunglasses back in place, she gave a faint nod and drifted back to 14A. But her focus had not shifted. Hours later, during descent into Kuala Lumpur, chaos erupted. The toddler began crying in her stroller, mother bending to soothe her as passengers scrambled for luggage. Suddenly, a voice pierced the din. "Let go of my child." I spun around. The woman from 14A had unbuckled the toddler and was lifting her. The mother clutched her daughter's arm, panic tearing through her voice. "This is my daughter. What are you doing?" The woman's tone was steady, unnerving. "You're mistaken. She's mine. She belongs with me." Gasps filled the cabin. A man muttered, "Oh God, a custody battle." Passengers froze, unsure whether to believe the polished, composed stranger or the frantic mother. I didn't wait. "Ma'am, put the child down immediately," I commanded, stepping forward. For a moment her calm cracked. She shoved the stroller toward the mother, nearly knocking her off balance, then bolted down the aisle. "Stop her," I yelled. 2 men lunged, blocking her path. She twisted, almost slipping free, but Clara grabbed her arm with iron strength. Together we held her until security boarded. Police arrived quickly. They checked documents, passports, airport cameras. The truth surfaced. The toddler was the mother's. The woman in pearls had no connection. Worse, she carried a pattern. Multiple reports of attempted abductions at different airports. Always wealthy in appearance, always serene, always targeting exhausted parents. She knew how to manipulate perception, how to weaponize appearance. The mother clutched her child, sobbing as officers led the woman away in cuffs. I stood frozen, sweat soaking my uniform. I'd faced turbulence, medical emergencies, even a fire alarm once mid-flight, but nothing compared to the cold horror of nearly watching a child disappear in plain sight while dozens hesitated, clouded by appearances. That night in the hotel, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment, the stare in the terminal, her hand on the stroller, her calm, deliberate voice. I thought about how quickly the crowd doubted the mother, how easily they leaned toward the polished stranger over the desperate parent. And I thought about the little girl's cry, reaching only for the one person who mattered. Sometimes horror isn't hijackings or fiery crashes. Sometimes it's pearls and perfume. Sometimes it's how quickly people trust the mask of wealth over the raw fear of a mother. I will never forget that flight, and I will never again assume danger wears a certain face, because evil can sit quietly in 14A, smiling behind designer sunglasses. I chose life in the skies because I longed to run away. Growing up in Sheffield, I always felt cornered by routine. My parents were ordinary people with practical jobs. My mother worked in a small clinic. My father repaired furnaces. Their expectations for me were simple: pursue something sensible like nursing or teaching. But I ached for distance, for endless horizons, and for the fleeting company of strangers. I wanted glimpses of the world, even if only through hurried layovers or stolen mornings in unfamiliar cities. At 23, I applied to a large British airline. To my disbelief and everyone else's, I was hired. The training tested us beyond limits: fire drills, emergency medical care, learning to plaster a smile even when shoes crushed our toes. But the first time I fastened that navy uniform with sharp lines, I felt like a different woman, someone bold. 3 years later, the boldness had drained from me. The work stripped me thin. Exhausting long hauls, sleepless jet lag, drunken passengers, turbulence both inside and out. Yet the night routes held a strange allure. Red eyes were hushed. Most passengers only wanted warmth, darkness and quiet. I liked the soft glow of reading lamps, the steady drone of engines like a colossal pulse. But one of those flights unraveled everything. It was November, bitter and raw. Flight 828 from Heathrow to Boston was on my schedule. That evening I glanced at the departure board. Delays across the Atlantic, except ours, still marked on time. The crew was small. Daniel, our purser, mid-40s, disciplined but decent. Chloe, my closest companion, golden-haired, playful, just 25. Priya, a new trainee, hesitant but eager. And Captain Richard Hale, a man with decades of calm confidence behind the controls. Boarding started after 11. Travelers shuffled in, hauling bags, half asleep already. Families, business people, students. Then came him. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, wearing a long black coat though the cabin was warm. His walk was slow, his gaze scanning each row as if searching. When he reached me at the door, I smiled and greeted him. He did not reply. His eyes, a pale slate gray, lingered on me a fraction too long before he turned down the aisle in silence. His assigned seat was 19A by the window mid-cabin. I remembered because he sat stiffly, palms flat on his thighs, staring out at runway lights. He never adjusted his belt, never touched his phone, never moved, just sat there. Something about him unsettled me, but I dismissed it. We encounter all kinds. The plane lifted past midnight. Service was uneventful. Most wanted blankets and rest, skipping meals. By 2:30 a.m., the cabin was dark, calm, engines thrumming, the occasional cough breaking the stillness. As I walked through checking belts and trays, I reached 19A and froze. He wasn't asleep, he was moving. Not casually, not like someone shifting for comfort. His head tilted back against the seat while his body swayed from side to side, as if following music no one else could hear. His hands twitched on his thighs in peculiar rhythmic motions. "Sir," I whispered. No response. His eyes half open, fixed somewhere far beyond the ceiling. I glanced around. Everyone else was sleeping. "Sir, are you okay?" He slowly turned his head. His gray eyes met mine, his lips parted. "You've got beautiful eyes." His tone was flat, hollow. Not admiration but observation. A chill swept over me. I managed a polite reply and urged him to rest, retreating quickly. In the galley I told Chloe. She gave a nervous laugh. "Airplane creeps. Ignore him." But I couldn't shake the emptiness in his voice. At 4 a.m., turbulence rattled the cabin. The belt lights blinked. Passengers stirred awake. I rushed through, ensuring everyone buckled up. When I reached row 19, I froze again. The seat was empty. No blanket, no trace. Daniel came up behind me. Problem? He asked. There was someone here, I whispered. Tall, black coat, seat 19A. He frowned, checked his manifest. That seat isn't booked. It's one of the few empty ones tonight. I could barely breathe. No, he was here. I spoke to him. Daniel gave me a steady look. You're overtired, Alicia. Get some coffee. But I knew. Half an hour later, walking past again, I saw him, seated calmly, as if he'd never vanished. My legs buckled. I nearly collided with Priya. Are you okay? She whispered. I pointed, but when she looked, the seat was vacant again. Her brow furrowed. It's just a seat, Alicia. For the next hour, I avoided that row, keeping busy with water rounds, tending to a sick child, anything to distract myself. But inevitably, I passed again, and there he was. This time, he turned before I could speak. You changed my seat, he said softly. My breath caught. Excuse me? You moved me. I was at the door first, then beside the woman. Now here. You keep moving me. I shook my head. Sir, you must be mistaken. Please stay seated with your belt fastened. He leaned closer, his voice sinking into a whisper that froze me. You'll make a beautiful corpse. I staggered back, pulse racing. In an instant, the seat was empty. As we prepared to descend into Boston, I trembled. My colleagues noticed. Chloe joked uneasily. Priya's face was lined with worry. Daniel sternly told me to keep it together. During my final walkthrough, passengers were drowsy but gathering belongings. The usual end-of-flight scene. Until I reached the back. There he stood, coat draped loosely, arms swaying in that strange rhythm, head rolling side to side, gray eyes burning into me. I froze, but no one else seemed to notice. He stepped closer, breath chilling against my ear. Ambassador of death. And then he was gone. We landed without incident. Sunlight spilled into the cabin, golden and steady. Passengers filed out laughing, yawning, normal. But row 19 remained untouched, belt perfectly laid, cushion smooth. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. Rest, Alicia. It's been a long week. But I knew the truth. I had seen him. Even now, months later, his gray eyes return in reflections. His voice repeats in my head. I live marked by that night. I never flew again. When people ask why I left the skies, I tell them I wanted an ordinary life. The real answer is simpler. I am afraid. Afraid that someday, on another red-eye, I'll look down the cabin and row 19 will not be empty. And next time, he won't just whisper.